Hello and welcome to this edition of Correspondence, the show that brings you the very best of France 24's reports from around the world. Now this week we are in a chocolate factory, and indeed it's a shame you can't smell this smell through a television set. In any case, this facility is running at full capacity. The French government has eased the lockdown just enough for a spot of Christmas shopping. Easter sales this year were unusually low due to the coronavirus pandemic, and the industry is relying heavily on Christmas to make up the losses. Usually 750 million euros worth of chocolate are sold during the holiday season. That's 10% of yearly sales. Back to our program. This week we'll be taking you to Egypt, to Greece, and well, to France. But we start in Cameroon, where our correspondents Tony Menga and Stéphane Noah have been deep underground into the country's illegal gold mines. Child labor is technically banned in Cameroon, but in these mines, children are working every day, sacrificing their health and their education. Here is their report.
A familiar landscape in Cameroon's eastern region, an expanse of mud ponds and artificial lakes. In this open-cast mine, hundreds of artisanal miners are working in waters soiled by mercury without any protection. Among them, dozens of children, including girls, sometimes younger than 5. Child labor is illegal but tolerated here, and it's in full view of everyone. Not far from there, we meet Ruth, one of the young miners here. That morning, like all mornings, the 14-year-old did not go to school. She spends her days in this hole, 7 meters deep. To get the best gold gram, Ruth works alongside another teenager who goes deep down into this dark underground tunnel. It is several kilometers long and can collapse at any time. Ruth's work can now begin. She washes the gravel for hours to obtain this small amount of gold, day in and day out. She has never been to school.
I've never been to school because my parents can't afford it. That's why I've been mining gold since I was young to support my family. I'm aware of the dangers in the mine, like the gas iron hill, working in a cave that can collapse at any time.
A few hours later, Ruth goes to the black market to sell the grains of gold to one of the many secret dealers in the area. He uses his scale to estimate Ruth's payout. Working with children does not bother the trafficker, to say the least.
Usually a gram is bought at 30 euros, or 27 euros, or 38 euros. But we give children 15 euros for a gram. It depends, because they cannot bargain.
Ruth leaves after selling 9 milligrams of gold for about 2 euros, 30 to 60% less than what an adult could have bargained for. Thomas and Junior have been fighting for miners to go back to school for several years.
Parents prefer to send young girls of school age to mines rather than sending them to school. Therefore, our duty as an NGO is to educate them so they can stop this practice.
About 100 children have enrolled in this school, but thousands still work in the mines. Education remains low on the list of priorities here, in a region which produces some 700 kilograms of gold each year.
And now to Egypt to meet the Nubians, an ancient people whose distant ancestors were the last pharaohs. Today, they are fighting to return to their land that was confiscated 50 years ago in order to build the Great Dam in Aswan. It's a report by Edward Dropsy and Claire Willio.
Colourful houses on the banks of the Nile, traditional handicrafts. Welcome to West Sohail. A few kilometres away from Aswan, tourists wander through a picture postcard setting. These young honeymooners seem thrilled. Nika and Kamal came to discover Nubia and the Nubians, an ancient people over 5,000 years old. In 1964, they were forced off their lands during the construction of the Aswan High Dam. Like the majority of young Egyptians, Kamal had been taught very little about the Nubian deportations.
As far as I know, that they are a minority and they are not treated very well by the Egyptian government. This is part of the things that I wouldn't agree with, but at the same time we needed this for the Egyptians.
Relocated an hour's drive from the Nile of their birth, the Nubians were moved to cities with no infrastructure and no work. At the time, Taha was around 20 years old.
فاحنا ما نقدرش نرفضه. وبعدين جينا هنا قعدنا غصب عنينا ودينا ما ندورش ما حدش كان بيدور علينا.
The power struggle between the Egyptian state and the Nubians has been going on for years. There have been protests and legal action. Bassam is one of a generation of young Nubians who've tried everything to reclaim their lands. But he's stood by, powerless, as the government has done nothing.
They promise us, yes, in one day they're gonna help Nubian people to come back in old Nubian, but it's not happening yet. Without the government, we cannot come back. For example, we need water there. We need electric there.
To protect his ancient heritage, Bassam has decided to keep up the fight, even if that could ultimately cost him dearly. Dozens of Nubian activists have been imprisoned for demanding to return to their ancestral lands.
Greece is in lockdown, but some Orthodox priests have decided to break the rules. They are holding services with no social distancing or masks, disregarding the 9 people limit for funerals, an attitude now sparking widespread anger amongst the Greek public. It's a report by Alexia Kefelas.
Sunday morning, the Orthodox Church of Cyprus. Despite the general confinement and the restrictions imposed on the country, sanitation rules have been openly flouted. In Cyprus, as in Greece, some priests defy week after week the ban on celebrating religious activities in public, a controversial role that doesn't sit too well with public opinion.
Δεν πρέπει να μπερδεύουν τον κόσμο ότι άμα πας στην εκκλησία δεν θα πάθεις τίποτα.
Γεμίσαμε κορονοϊό, γι' αυτό. Έχουν πεθάνει και πολλοί ιερείς. Είναι κρίμα. Να μην το ανοίξουμε.
Καθορίζουν πολλά πράγματα και κυβέρνηση βγάζουν, αν θέλουν. Δεν είναι τυχαίο ότι όλα τα πολιτικά κόμματα θέλουν να τα έχουν καλά με την Εκκλησία.
And with good reason. The church and state are not separate entities in Greece. So when the 82-year-old head of the Greek Orthodox Church, Hieronymus I, is tested positive with Covid-19, the media treats it with the attention worthy of a head of state, informing the population of the evolution of his health on a daily basis.
Είμαστε εδώ όχι μόνο σήμερα, είμαστε εδώ από τις 19 του μηνός όταν μπήκε στο νοσοκομείο. Στην Ελλάδα ο κόσμος είναι πολύ κοντά στην Εκκλησία και σε τέτοιες δύσκολες στιγμές όπως αυτή της πανδημίας έρχεται ακόμα πιο κοντά, απευθύνεται στην Εκκλησία.
The Archbishop of Athens will be released from the hospital a few days later. But what about the powerful Greek Orthodox Church? Even today, the unease is palpable, especially among Athenian priests like Father Alexandrakis, who have been scrupulously adhering to the instructions.
Πολλές φορές υπήρχαν αμφιβολίες αν υπάρχει κορονοϊός. Πολλές φορές υπήρξαν πιέσεις, ανοίξτε τις εκκλησίες, αφήστε τους πιστούς να μπουν μέσα. Όμως από την αρχή αυτό το οποίο η Εκκλησία μας έδωσε ήταν να κρατήσουμε όλα εκείνα τα μέτρα προφύλαξης.
His fear now is that his faithful will be deprived of attending Christmas services.
In France, the first lockdown lasted for 2 months, from March till May 2020. A lot of elderly people haven't got over this period yet. Those in retirement homes found themselves isolated in their rooms with no visits allowed, while those living at home were stuck and had no one to talk to. Many now feel psychological distress. We went to meet them with Eleonore Vanel and Mai Schuster. This park around her retirement home was Susan's sole horizon during France's first lockdown. The 91-year-old found herself cooped up, alone, in her little room with no visits allowed.
I really felt like I'd been sentenced and imprisoned. I wasn't even allowed to walk in the corridors. My meals were brought to me every morning, lunch and dinner. I had no contact with anyone, nothing. It was awful. This is just not possible, I thought. I would have thrown myself out of the window if it hadn't been locked.
Susan was left traumatized by these months of extreme isolation.
It left a deep mark on me. I can still feel it. I still can't really express what I felt in those moments.
Susan started seeing a psychologist this autumn. Emotional distress can cause very tangible damage to the health of elderly people. Symptoms are well documented.
In extreme cases, we witness a syndrome known as geriatric cachexia. At that stage, the patients lose taste for life. They slip away. They stop eating, hydrating, walking.
Faced with a potential mental health crisis, the French government decided to allow visits to retirement homes during the country's second lockdown.
Oh, t'as eu un shampoing ce matin, c'est bien ça. Ils t'ont coiffé. C'est vous qui l'avez coiffé, non?
Christian visits his mother regularly.
Il a du mal à tenir ton truc là.
And Marcel, aged 94, lives for these moments of complicity.
I know he's coming, so I wait for him.
Rules are strict. 2 one-hour visits are allowed per week.
When visits were forbidden, it was a catastrophe. My mother would tell me, what's better, dying of COVID or of sadness?
Social isolation doesn't only happen in retirement homes, it also affects the elderly who live by themselves in their own houses. The pandemic has made the isolated elderly even more lonely. In France, an estimated 300,000 senior citizens are in a state of so-called social death, with no one to talk to. Well, that's it for this edition. I'd like to thank Julie Dunkelhoff for the camera work, Natasha Milret for coordination, and Alain Ducasse for having us in his chocolate factory. I leave you with these delicious pictures. As we all know, chocolate is clearly part of Christmas magic. Thank you for watching, and please do stay safe and stay tuned to France 24.